Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. I'd like you to know that I got an invitation from Mayapur, even though I can't go there for physical reasons. And they invited me to come and give a seminar, about why should we read Prabhupada's books and how to read all that, So I wrote back to the devotee and I said, well, I can't come because I'm this, that, the other thing. And I said, but I got advice, a piece of advice. Promote the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. And rather than talk about reading Prabhupada's books and why we should, just read Prabhupada's books. So the thing is, even though it seems like a little thing we're doing, it's actually a big thing. It's actually a big thing. And it's spreading, this reading out loud with small groups of devotees, Prabhupada's books straight through like we're doing. It's becoming a thing in our movement. And Krishna is sending people like Hector from east to west coast and north to south. So don't forget to share, because sharing means caring, and caring means sharing. When you've gotten something so nice that it makes you a happy camper, even though the material world is such a heavy place, horrible place, and getting worse day by day, we become happier by the day by coming to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books and associating with Prabhupada and all the great saintly devotees that appear in Srila Prabhupada's books. Okay, that's my track for the day, thought for the day. Okay. Oh, we're late. Srila Sanatana Goswami is one of our great teachers in the line of our authorities, spiritual authorities. And Haribol Prana. And he wrote a prayer glorifying the book that we're reading, Srimad-Bhagavatam. And in the prayer, we get information about what the book is, what it means, and why we should be reading it. It goes like this. It's Srimad-Bhagavata, Mahima Stotram. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidwan Noditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshaksharayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Mando Matsangin, Madguro Man Mahadana, Mannistaragmagya, Madanandanamostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin, adini chochata kara, anchagadachin mam, premna rit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O shelter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we've reached the 11th canto, 13th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, in the middle of the teachings of Krishna to Uddhava. And I think we're on text 8, is it? Correct? Huh?
Yes.
Now, Krishna is giving more detail about how we can escape the illusory energy of the Lord. And he begins by explaining what that illusory energy is. So we're a little bit into this chapter. We have a new guest named Hector, who we want to welcome with affection, by all the devotees here and out there in cyberspace. We got about 2,000 people out there. Not all of them watch all the time, but they're out there. So your name just spread to a lot of places.
Hello, everybody.
Hare Krishna. There you go. Okay. Text 8. When the annihilation of the material elements is imminent, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his form... 8. It's not 8. I can't see the number. What is it? Where am I? 8? I'm in 8.
13. Is it 13 chapter?
13 chapter. Sorry. I see I put the letters bigger, and the little square that shows where it is, it's half only there and I can't read it properly. Sorry. Okay. 13. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Hamsa-avatara, right. Krishna is telling Arjuna the story of the Hamsa-avatara and the teachings of the Hamsa-avatara. Answering the questions of
Kumaras.
the Kumaras, correct. Oh, actually, maybe Kumaras were there. Who else was there?
Lord Brahma.
Lord Brahma. It's questions of Brahma. It's actually meant for Brahma, but the Kumaras are there. And they're the ones that know what to ask. Okay. You got to know what to ask. If you don't know what to ask, you're liable not to get the right answer. If you're looking for gold and you don't know anything about it, what it looks like, how to test it, then you're liable to get sold a box of cornflakes for $50,000. So these big books give us an idea of what we're actually looking for, so we won't get cheated. Okay, text 8. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Krishna, generally, human beings know that material life brings great future unhappiness, and still they try to enjoy material life. My dear Lord, how can one in knowledge act just like a dog, an ass, or a goat?" Purport. The standard methods of enjoyment in the material world are sex, money, and false prestige, all of which are obtained with great suffering and eventually lost. One engaged in material life suffers in the present and has only a very bleak future to look forward to in the continuing cycle of birth and death. Thus, how can human beings who have seen these things and know them very well continue to enjoy life like dogs, asses, and goats. Often a dog will approach a bitch for sex, but the lady dog may not be attracted and will show her teeth and snarl and threaten the poor dog with serious injury. Still, he goes about his business, trying to get a little sex pleasure. Similarly, many times a dog risks being beaten or shot while stealing some food in a place where he knows he should not go. The ass is very attracted to the she-ass, but the lady ass often kicks him in the legs. Similarly, the ass's master gives the ass a handful of grass, which the poor ass could get anywhere, and then burdens him with great loads. The goat is generally raised for slaughter, but even when the goat is brought into the slaughterhouse, he shamelessly goes after the lady goat to get sex pleasure. In this way, even at the risk of being shot, bitten, beaten, and slaughtered, animals persist in their foolish sense gratification. How can an educated human being commit himself to such a condemned way of life, wherein the result is practically the same as that of the animals? If by cultivating the mode of goodness, one's life is filled with happiness, enlightenment, and future rewards, why would anyone cultivate the modes of passion and ignorance? This is Uddhava's question. Text 9 and 10. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind. And when such false knowledge arises within one's consciousness, material passion, the cause of great suffering, pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness. Then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for material advancement. Thus, by constantly thinking of the modes of material nature, a foolish person is afflicted with unbearable material desires." Is it better in here now? The temperature is better? Feels better now? Okay. Purport. Those who are trying to enjoy material sense gratification are not actually intelligent, although they consider themselves most intelligent. Although such foolish persons themselves criticize the miseries of material life in innumerable books, songs, newspapers, television programs, civic committees, I can't get no satisfaction. And even they become top sellers. Anyway, that was my edit. Sorry, my comment. The process by which one is helplessly bound in illusion is clearly described here. A materialistic person is always thinking, "Oh, what a beautiful house. I wish I could buy it." Or, "What a beautiful woman. I wish I could touch her." Or, "What a powerful position. I wish I could occupy it." And so on. The words sankalpa, savikalpaka indicate that a materialist is always making new plans or modifying his old plans to increase his material enjoyment. Although in his saner moments, he admits that material life is full of suffering. The mind is created from the mode of goodness, as described in Sankhya philosophy, and the natural peaceful situation of the mind is pure love of Krishna, in which there is no mental disturbance, disappointment, or confusion. Artificially, the mind is dragged down to a lower platform in passion or ignorance, and thus one is never satisfied. I can't get no satisfaction. Do you know that? These guys are doing another world tour. And this, whatever his name is? Mick Jagger? Yeah. Mick Jagger is like 80 years old or something. He comes up on stage and he looks like, but they're still at it. I can't get no satisfaction. and they keep doing the same thing again. Of course, they're getting a lot of money for it. But anyway, symbolic, perfect symbol, materialistic consciousness. Text 11. One who does not control the material senses comes under the control of material desires and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of the emotive passion. Such a person executes material activities, although clearly seeing that the result will be future unhappiness. Text 12. Although the intelligence of a learned person may be bewildered by the modes of passion and ignorance, he should again carefully bring the mind under control. By clearly seeing the contamination of the modes of nature, he does not become attached. This is the purpose of knowledge. Text 13. A person should be attentive and grave and never lazy or morose. Mastering the yoga procedures of breathing and sitting properly, one should practice fixing the mind on me at dawn, noon, and sunset. And thus gradually the mind should be completely absorbed in me. 14. The actual yoga system as taught by my devotees, headed by Sanaka Kumara, is simply this. Having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, one should directly and appropriately absorb it in me. Purport. The word yatha, accordingly or properly, indicates that like Uddhava, one should hear directly from Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, and directly, adha, fix the mind in Lord Krishna. Text 15. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Keshava, at what time and in what form did you instruct the science of yoga to Sanaka and his brothers? I now desire to know about these things." 16. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Once the mental sons of Lord Brahma, namely the sages headed by Sanaka, inquired from their father about the difficult subject matter of the supreme goal of yoga." Text 17. The sages headed by Sanaka said, "O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly, the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind." That's how it happens, by sound. Right? That's how it happens. Material desires enter by sound, by taste, by sight, by smell, by touch. It distracts us from Krishna consciousness. So Krishna says, yato nishchalati. Yato nishchalati. Manas chanchalamastava. From wherever the flickering mind goes, bring it back. Bring it back to Krishna. Therefore, how can a person think when the train is blowing its brains out over here? Hare Krishna. I'll start this verse again. The sages headed by Sanaka said, "O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly, the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us." Purport. As described above, as long as one is a conditioned soul, the modes of material nature, manifested in the form of sense objects, constantly disturb the mind. And by their harassment, one is deprived of the actual perfection of life. Text 18. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, Brahma himself, who was born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living entities within the material world, being the best of the demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons, headed by Sanaka. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, and thus he could not discover the essential answer to this question." Purport. Srila Jiva Goswami has quoted 3 verses from the 2nd canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam as follows. In the 9th chapter, verse 32, Lord Krishna blessed Brahma with realized knowledge of the Lord's actual form, qualities, and activities. In the 9th chapter, verse 37, the Lord ordered Brahma to rigidly carry out the Lord's injunctions and affirmed that Brahma would thus never be bewildered in his cosmic decision-making. In the 6th chapter, verse 34, Lord Brahma assured his son, Narada, "O Narada, because I have caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, with great zeal, whatever I say has never proved to have been false, nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, nor are my senses ever degraded by temporary attachment to matter." In the present verse, in this 13th chapter of the 11th canto, Lord Krishna states that Brahma, unfortunately, did become bewildered by his creative functions, thus providing a grave lesson to all of the Lord's empowered representatives. Although one may be elevated to an exalted position of the Lord's transcendental service, at any moment there is danger of false pride polluting one's devotional mentality. Dun, 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 dun. Text 19. Lord Brahma desired to attain the answer to the question that was puzzling him, and thus he fixed his mind on me, the Supreme Lord. At that time, in my form of Hamsa, I became visible to Lord Brahma. Purport. Hamsa means swan, and the specific ability of the swan is to separate a mixture of milk and water, extracting the milk, the rich milky portion. Similarly, Lord Krishna appeared as Hamsa, or the swan, in order to separate the pure consciousness of Lord Brahma from the modes of material nature. Text 20. Thus seeing me, the sages, placing Brahma in the lead, came forward and worshipped my lotus feet. And they frankly asked me, "Who are you?" Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments, when Brahma was unable to answer the question placed by the sages, he fixed his mind and thought of the Supreme Lord. The Lord then assumed the form of Hamsa and appeared before Lord Brahma and the sages, who proceeded to inquire about the specific identity of the Lord. Text 21. My dear Uddhava, the sages, being eager to understand the ultimate truth of the yoga system, thus inquired from me. Now please hear as I explain that which I spoke unto the sages. 22. My dear Brahmanas, if, when asking me who I am, you believe that I am also a jiva soul, and that there is no ultimate difference between us, since all souls are ultimately one without individuality, then how is your question possible or appropriate? Ultimately, what is the real situation or resting place of both yourselves and of me? He's asking this question because the sages were a little bit attached to the impersonal understanding of the absolute truth. So it's saying, what do you mean by me? Got it? Purport. Ashraya means the resting place or shelter. Lord Krishna's question, what is our actual resting place or shelter, means what is our ultimate nature or constitutional position. This is because no one can come to rest or be satisfied unless one is in one's natural position. The example is given that one may travel all over the world, but ultimately one becomes satisfied by returning to one's own home. Similarly, a crying baby is satisfied when embraced by its own mother. By inquiring about the shelter or resting place of himself and the Brahmanas, the Lord is indicating the eternal constitutional position of every living entity. If Lord Krishna were also in the jiva category, and if all living entities, including him, were thus equal, there would be no deep purpose in one living entity inquiring and another answering. Only one who is in a superior position can meaningfully answer important questions. It may be argued that the bona fide spiritual master answers all the questions of the disciple and that the guru is in the jiva category. The answer is that the bona fide spiritual master speaks not in his own behalf, but as a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is in the Vishnu category. A so-called guru speaking on his own behalf as a jiva soul is useless and is unable to meaningfully answer serious questions. Thus the sage's question, Ko Bhavan, who are you, indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally an individual person. And because the sages headed by Lord Brahma offered obeisances and worshipped the Lord, it is understood that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma, as the first created being in this universe, could not accept any other living entity except the Lord as worshipable. But Krishna's actual purpose is to explain the ultimate perfection of yoga, which the sages were desiring to know. If one becomes fixed in transcendental knowledge, the mutual attraction between the material mind and the material sense objects automatically ceases. The spiritual mind is not attracted to material objects of gratification, and thus by spiritualizing the mind, material existence automatically slackens. By questioning the propriety of the sage's question, the Lord is assuming the position of the spiritual master and preparing to give valuable instructions. One should never be envious of a bona fide spiritual master, especially if, as in the case of Lord Hamsa, speaking to the sages headed by Brahma and Sanaka Kumara, the Guru is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Text 23. If by asking me, who are you, you were referring to the material body, then I must point out that all material bodies are constituted of 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Thus you should have asked, who are you 5? If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially of the same elements, then your question is still meaningless, since there would be no deep purpose in distinguishing one body from another. Thus it appears that in asking my identity, you are merely speaking words, without any real meaning or purpose. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this verse as follows. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna demonstrated that if the sages accepted the impersonal philosophy that all living beings are ultimately one in all respects, their question, "Who are you?" was meaningless, since there would be no philosophical basis to distinguish one manifestation of spirit soul from another. In this verse, the Lord refutes the false identification with the material body, composed of 5 elements. If the sages accepted the body as the self, then their question was meaningless, since they would have to ask, "Who are you 5? If the sages replied that although the body is composed basically of 5 elements, and these elements can be considered a single substance in the form of the whole body, then the Lord has already replied by the words samaneshu chavastuta. The bodies of human beings, demigods, animals, etc. are all composed of the same 5 elements and are essentially the same. Therefore the question, "Who are you?" is ultimately meaningless. Thus, if one accepts either the theory that all living entities are ultimately the same, or the theory that all living entities are ultimately non-different from their material bodies, in both cases, the question of the sages is meaningless. The sages might argue that even among learned persons, it is common practice to ask questions and give answers on many subjects as a part of normal life. The sages could point out that Lord Krishna also distinguished among them by his saying, "Vipra," O Brahmanas, and "Vaha," or "your question," as expressed in this verse. In this way it is seen that the Lord also accepts the ordinary customs of questions and answers. To answer this argument, Lord Krishna states, "Vacharambo yanartakaha." The Lord states, "My addressing you as Brahmanas is merely an exhibition of words if we are ultimately not different. I merely reciprocated with your approach to me. Therefore, if we are ultimately one, neither my statement nor your question has any real meaning. I can conclude, therefore, by your question to me that you are not all actually very intelligent. Therefore, why are you inquiring after ultimate knowledge? Aren't you all embarrassed?" Srila Madhvacharya points out in this regard that the question of the sages was not appropriate, since they had already seen their father, Lord Brahma, worshipping the lotus feet of Lord Hamsa. Since their spiritual master and father was worshipping Lord Hamsa, they should have immediately understood the Lord's position, and their question is thus meaningless. Text 24. Within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone, and nothing besides me. All of you please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. Purport. Lord Krishna has already explained that if the sages consider all living entities to be the same, or if they consider the living entity to be the same as his body, then their question, "Who are you?" is inappropriate. Now the Lord refutes the conception that he is a supreme God far beyond and different from everything within this world. Modern agnostic philosophers preach that God created the world and then retired or went away. According to them, God has no tangible connection with this world, nor does he interfere in human affairs. Ultimately, they claim God is so great that he cannot be known. Therefore, no one should waste time trying to understand God. To refute such foolish ideas, the Lord here explains that since everything is the expansion of his potency, he is not different from anything. Nothing can exist separately from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus everything shares in the Lord's nature, although some manifestations are superior and others inferior. The Lord is testing the intelligence of the sages by pointing out various contradictions in their questions. Even if the Lord is supreme, he is not different from his creation. Therefore, what is the meaning of their question? Who are you? We can clearly see that the Lord is paving the way for a deep discussion of spiritual knowledge. Didn't know what you were getting yourself into, did you?
This is along the lines.
Oh, good, good. That's really good to hear. Text 25. See, I knew if we just keep doing this every day, then Krishna, in the heart of every living being, will bring people gradually, even without our making a big show about it, the ones that want to understand how deeply, what spiritual knowledge is. 25. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects. And similarly, the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. Purport. Lord Krishna, in the form of Hamsa-avatara, on the pretext of finding contradictions in the simple inquiry of the sons of Brahma, who are you, is actually preparing to teach the sages perfect spiritual knowledge, but only after first rejecting two false concepts of life, namely, that all living entities are the same in all respects, and that the living entity is identical with this outward or subtle body. Lord Krishna now answers the difficult question that puzzled even Lord Brahma. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the sons of Lord Brahma were thinking as follows: Our dear Lord, if it is indeed true that we are unintelligent, still your Lordship has stated that you are actually everything, because everything is the expansion of your potency. Therefore, you are also the mind and the sense objects, which are the subject matter of our question. The material sense objects always enter into the functions of the mind, and similarly, the mind always enters into the material sense objects. Thus, it is proper that we inquire from your Lordship about the process by which the sense objects will no longer enter the mind, and the mind will no longer enter the sense objects. Please be merciful and give us the answer. So this is a very big lesson here, because when we're materially conditioned, we don't even know how to ask or what to ask. And what do they say? Ask a stupid question and you get a stupid answer. It's a saying. So we have to learn how to inquire. So the Bhagavatam is so wonderful, and Krishna is so wonderful. He even teaches us how to inquire and what to inquire about. So our mind can actually go in the right direction. The Lord answers as follows. My dear sons, it is a fact that the mind enters into the material sense objects, and the sense objects into the mind. Thus, although the living entity is actually part and parcel of me, being as I am also eternally conscious, and although the eternal form of the living entity is spiritual, in conditioned life, the living entity artificially imposes upon himself the mind and sense objects, which act as covering designations of the eternal soul. Since it is the natural function of the material mind and sense objects to mutually interact, how can you possibly endeavor to prevent such a mutual attraction? Since both the material mind and sense objects are useless, they both should be completely given up. And thus automatically you will be free from all material duality. Srila Sridhar Swami points out that the symptom of the material mind is the tendency to consider oneself to be the ultimate doer and enjoyer. Naturally, one with such a puffed up mentality is helplessly attracted by the sense objects. One who considers himself to be the doer and enjoyer will be irresistibly attracted to the means for attaining sense gratification and false prestige, namely, exploitation of material objects. Above the material mind, however, is intelligence, which can perceive the existence of the eternal spirit soul. It is not possible to separate the material mind from the sense objects, because they naturally exist together. Therefore, by intelligence, one must realize one's eternal form as spirit soul, part and parcel of the Lord, and completely reject the bogus material mentality. One who revives his original spiritual mentality becomes automatically detached from material attraction. Therefore, one should cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification. When the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment, the superior intelligence must immediately detect such illusion. In this way, one should purify one's mentality by devotional service to the Lord. Such detachment and intelligence automatically awaken, and by full understanding of one's original spiritual form, one is properly situated in eternal consciousness. I want to point out to you one verse from the Gita in which Krishna graphically describes this situation. Last verse of the 4th chapter. You ready? It's the last verse of the 4th and the 3rd. I'll read both. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And at the end of the 4th chapter, therefore, the doubts that have risen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. And don't think that it's going to be easy. And the reason it isn't easy is being laid out here like clear as day what we're up against. We'll do one more and then we'll stop. Text 26. Yeah. One is properly situated in eternal consciousness. Text 26. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. Purport. The Lord again states here that it is most difficult to separate the material mind from its objects. Because the material mind, by definition, considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. Just letting it sink in a little bit. Just letting it sink in a little bit. I'll hear this again. The Lord again states here that it is most difficult to separate the material mind from its objects, because the material mind, by definition, considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. It must be understood that giving up the material mind does not mean giving up mental activities. It's so beautiful, because nowadays it's the big thing. Mindfulness. They're all, you got to be mindful. Then they put a little thing on your watch that you just, okay, go into mindfulness, breathe. 7 times. And then you're supposed to be mindful. Give us a break. It must be understood that giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all mental activities, but instead means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. Since time immemorial, the material mind and senses have been in contact with the sense objects. Therefore, how is it possible for the material mind to give up its objects, which are the basis of its existence? And not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also since time immemorial, the material mind and senses have been in contact with the sense objects. Therefore, how is it possible for the material mind to give up its objects, which are the basis of its existence? And not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also, because of the mind's desires, the material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment. You see what happens? As soon as there's a noise, everybody goes, mm-hmm. Right? It's not easy to keep the mind fixed, especially at this length of time with such deep thoughts. It's not easy. But this is the process. And if we continue to do this for at least 40 years, you'll get it. You'll get it. Guaranteed. So see, here's what it's saying practically is this. The mind is a repository. Everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything you smell, everything you taste, everything you touch, it sends the impressions to the mind automatically. And therefore it's all there, ready to manufacture another taste or form or smell or taste in your dream. And it's like a spool. And as soon as it's time for you to go to your new body, the spool just goes like that over to the next body. And there it is. All your potential desires, all the things you wanted, everything, and there you got a new body, according to your mind. And not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also, because of the mind's desires, the material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment. Thus, separation between the mind and sense objects is not actually feasible, nor does it serve any purpose. If one retains a material mentality, considering oneself to be supreme, one may renounce sense gratification, considering it to be ultimately the cause of unhappiness, but one will not be able to remain on such an artificial platform, nor will such renunciation serve any real purpose. Without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. Just as the sun rays are part of the sun, the living entities are part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity is completely absorbed in his identity as the part and parcel of the Personality of Godhead, he becomes actually wise and easily gives up the material mind and sense objects. The word mad-rupa in this verse indicates absorption of the mind in the form, qualities, pastimes, and associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Immersed in such ecstatic meditation, one should render devotional service to the Lord. And this will automatically drive away the influence of sense gratification. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense. There's the answer to the question you always get. How can I do this? How can I do that? You can't. That's the whole point. But we keep answering that same question, or asking that same question. So here it goes again. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects. But by worshiping the Lord in the mood of being his eternal part and parcel servant, one is infused with the Lord's potency, which easily drives away the darkness of ignorance. So I'm giving you, for the first time in all these years of doing this, homework. Homework. I want you to read again these last few verses and purports before we come back tomorrow. Read it slowly. Read it carefully. I'm telling you, I'm noticing in the world, especially young people, they've forgotten how to read. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to read. their minds are too agitated, so they can't just read it carefully and clearly, put together the points, make the conclusion, and get relief. Okay, homework, right? Assignment. I mean, I don't have any, I'm not kind of going to be a professor, write things down and, you know, give you a grade and everything. But you all know what I mean. Hare Krishna. We'll end our reading for tonight and open up our open mic session. And if you have any questions, or if something that you heard made an impression on you that you want to reflect on, or have further discussion on, or inquire about, please be our guest. Hare Krishna. We have a mic here that follows you around the room. Yes, Prana. This is our resident Pandit, Pranahari. He's also in charge of our Brahmacharya ashram, just in case you want to join and take this more seriously.
In that last report, it mentioned that, excuse me, if one retains a material mentality, considering oneself to be supreme, one may renounce sense gratification, considering it to be ultimately the cause of unhappiness, but one will not be able to remain on such an artificial platform, nor will such renunciation serve any real purpose. I think that's like the
Profound.
ticket there. Yeah, it's
Profound.
so profound.
That's the ticket.
Because we take to we read about it, we understand that, oh, material sense gratification is the cause of my unhappiness. But we still have the mentality of trying to be the enjoyer. So then if this makes me unhappy, get rid of it, and then I'm going to enjoy still. And then that's why it's saying it's a temporary platform, and you always are going, it's unsteady. It's unsteady.
Read the sentence again. There's one point that you missed that I want to point out. Read the sentence again.
Okay. If one retains a material mentality, considering oneself to be supreme.
There you go.
That's
there
the material mentality.
There you go. If you think you're your body, you're a Maya body.
If I think I'm my body.
If you think you're your body, you're an impersonalist. That's the point being made. And therefore, you can't make that connection. Because you'll think that you're the doer, and then because it's not true. And you think you give up the sense gratification, but you're not actually doing it. Therefore, you can't stay on that platform, because the next minute it'll all come, like we were talking about before, coming into your mind through through the sense objects and the sense and the knowledge acquiring senses. Therefore, it can't stay fixed because it's not true. What isn't true can't stay fixed. Therefore, material knowledge is useless because it never stays fixed. And this is the beauty of these scriptures and the knowledge contained in these scriptures. It never changes. And even the material, I wish Jair was here because he's the physicist. He'd be having an ecstasy right now. Even if they get these theories that are very, very subtle and only a few people can understand, and they make up their own jargon so that only they can understand and talk about it, and then they sit up in their ivory towers and look down at everyone else and say, if you could only understand what we know, then you can. Yeah, that's what they're doing. That's what's going on. But it doesn't change, because then the next year they came up with another theory. And the next physicist comes and says, yes, but didn't you consider this? Therefore it can't stay. So if you can fix your mind on knowledge that doesn't change, you will get a sensation, a sense that you are eternal. And if you fix your mind on the activities of the Lord and the Lord's form, which is definitely eternal and in the most profound way, then your mind will get a taste, and that taste will allow you to be able to distance yourself from the objects of sense gratification. Naturally. You will feel, because unless we have something superior, we won't give up what we have. Therefore it says here, it's not possible to give up the objects of sense gratification. They're too interlinked. So we don't, that's the wrong approach. Just renunciation. What is that verse? Third chapter, beginning of the third chapter. Towards the beginning of the third chapter. Nakarmanam, anarnaman, naishkarmyam, purushošnite, nachasanyasanad eva, siddhim, samadhi. Not merely by abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. You got something? Go ahead. Hannah's back from Florida. She's going to stay with her grandmother and study herbalism and Krishna consciousness.
I just want to reread what we read and relate it to what you quoted in the last chapter, in the end of the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It is not possible to separate the material mind from the sense objects because they naturally exist together. Therefore, by intelligence, one must realize one's eternal form as spirit soul, part and parcel of the Lord, and completely reject the bogus material mentality. And then in the end of the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you read that we have to control our minds, get control over our mind. I just wanted to say, I used to think that reading that, control your mind was like a rigid thing, and like, okay, let me not think about these things, and I was really rigid with myself. But reading this, gauge one's intelligence and remembering that we're part and parcel of Krishna, there's no rigidity in that. It's more like compassion for ourselves, and that's the point I wanted to make.
That's actually a good point, that we have to have compassion for ourselves also, which isn't it's not so obvious, and sometimes it's not put like that, but it's actually a good point you're making. I made the point the other night that if we are too much thinking of how bad we are, then we'll end up offending a Vaishnava.
Why?
Because we're Vaishnavas.
Oh. I thought it was because we're harsh with ourselves, we'll be harsh with others.
That's also there. But this is the point I'm making, is that you have to be compassionate to yourself. It means being compassionate to yourself, to take this teaching and follow it and apply it, because it will allow you to detach yourself from the sense of enjoying, the sense of owning. The sense of owning comes from forgetfulness of Krishna and our real identity as a part and parcel of Krishna. This is what was being said just now. But if we think this belongs to Krishna, this belongs to Krishna, this belongs to Krishna, or she or he belongs to Krishna, if we have be married or friend or whatever, then our vision automatically changes. Not out of our endeavor, but there is some endeavor. at the same time. This is why Brahma, this is such a fantastic section. Isn't it amazing? Every time you think it can't get better, it can't get deeper, it can't get more, it does. Therefore, we keep reading this Bhagavatam like this every day, without fail, together, and try to understand. Eventually we'll get it. Just like we're getting it right now, together. I'm not saying that we can retain it, and the test of how advanced we are is how long we can retain it. That's the test of our realization, the test of our advancement, of our level of advancement, is how well we can retain it during the day. Therefore, what does it say? I don't remember the Sanskrit, sorry. But it says, the process, Sharanagati, accept those things that are favorable to advancement in Krishna consciousness, spiritual life. Reject those things that are unfavorable. And if you do that, you will perceive during the day the presence, through that instruction, Krishna's presence. And as you do that, you will feel protected. And your fear and the level of anxiety that keeps you from actually tasting these things will subside. And then you will want to please the Lord. You will want, what does Jesus say? Not my, but thy will, O Lord. Same. You want to be one with the Lord, not merge and become just one being, all of us, which is completely ridiculous, and think you're God, which was the whole purpose of the first, statement of Hamsa-avatara to the questions of the Kumaras. And then what? Then you become humble. Then you become meek, and the meek shall inherit the earth. That's what Lord Chaitanya is waiting for. Trinadapi sunichina, tarodapi. By this knowledge, we should become humble. The closer we actually come to Krishna, we will become humble in a natural sense, in a natural way, that we'll see the difference between Krishna and us. We'll also see the oneness, both. That's the ashram leader, just in case you want to join up after this. This is our universal. She's actually the one that's guiding the whole thing.
I don't want to.
Her name is Nitya.
He didn't want to ask.
A stupid question. Because with stupid question comes stupid answers. there's no question that I can ask.
Woody, let me ask you a question.
Alright.
Okay? What did you think of what you just heard?
From the reading or from what you were just talking about?
Both.
From what you were just talking about right now, I felt I was able to connect that a lot more, because I was just telling Doug this through the practices that I've been practicing. I guess I've been able to kind of just be conscious about our connection throughout the day, and it's really hard to talk about.
Yeah, but if you get educated, you can talk really nicely about it.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, take it from me. I've been doing this for 47 years, no joke. And you can ask anybody here. I don't talk to just everybody like this, but sometimes I do. When someone's actually ready to hear and is actually curious to the point where there's some seriousness. So I think that you're right on the verge of being able to put the questions into proper form, so that you can really make tangible, step forward in a way that sticks, like I was just saying, in a way that stays, not just is fleeting, comes and goes.
I think I have it in a sense. I feel pretty humbled throughout the day. Just from I really have a hard time explaining myself, my thoughts, and it's really hard.
That's real humility. That's nice. That's nice. Rather than show off, you don't want to say something that you haven't grasped completely yet. That's very nice mentality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
How old are you?
19 or 20 now.
20.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunate soul. To be here and hearing these things in this company at this age and being naturally attracted to it is a very, very fortunate situation.
I'm grateful that.
Yeah, there's a saying in Sanskrit, Maha-bhagya. Maha means great, greatly fortunate. Maha-bhagya. Bhagya. Maha-bhagya. Greatly fortunate. In this culture, at your age, to come here and just say what you just said in this company, after having heard what you just heard, is Maha-bhagya. Greatly fortunate. So run with it. Up the middle. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, we're going to stop here at 7:30. I've got to go and prepare myself for. We're going to start the Gita tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
We'll start recording the Gita tomorrow. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. See you all tomorrow night at the same time, and you can be sure of it. Because when you do this every night without fail, for as long as we have, it just gets really nice. Come on in, the water's fine. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow. Hari Bol.